Scanning the system now, sir, Tactical Officer June reported. Multiple debris fields, combat still ongoing at the third planet. On screen, Lee ordered. What appeared before them defied all expectations. Rather than the expected scene, of hive ships overwhelming human defenses, the battle appeared evenly matched. More shocking still, human warships were actively pursuing hive vessels, not merely defending. Are they hunting the hive ships? Asked Navigation Officer Min, disbelief evident in her voice. Lee leaned forward, studying the tactical display. Magnify Sector 4. The screen zoomed in on a human destroyer, its port side blackened from what must have been a direct hit from a hive plasma lance. By Confederation standards, the ship should have retreated or been abandoned. Instead, it was accelerating toward a hive cruiser, weapons firing continuously. They're fighting with damaged ships, Lee murmured. Just like they said they would. The Confederation force moved closer, still maintaining safe distance from the battle. As they watched, a human vessel took a devastating hit that ripped open its midsection. Lee winced, expecting to see the standard emergency protocols: power down, evacuate crew, abandon ship. Instead, the vessel's remaining weapons continued firing as repair crews in spacesuits could be seen working on the hull breach. Sir, we're being hailed by the human flagship, Communications Officer Yu announced. The view screen shifted to show a human command center filled with smoke. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the face of a woman with a bloodied gash across her forehead. Confederation vessel, this is Captain Kang of the UES Dauntless. Good timing. We could use some help with the hive cruisers in Sector 6. Lee struggled to maintain his composure. Captain, your vessel appears heavily damaged. Do you require evacuation assistance? Captain Kang actually laughed. Evacuation? We're still at 80% combat effectiveness. Those bugs hit hard, but not hard enough. Over the next 12 hours, the Confederation forces witnessed human battle tactics that contradicted everything taught in their military academies. Human ships deliberately took hits on their armored sections to protect more vulnerable areas. Damaged vessels coordinated to trap hive ships between their firing arcs. And most shocking of all, the humans had dedicated teams that specialized in mid-battle repairs. We call them damage control teams, explained Human Officer Jin during a brief lull in the fighting. He showed Commander Lee a schematic of the human destroyer class. Every compartment can be sealed individually. Every major system has backups. We can lose up to 30% of our hull and still maintain combat operations. But why risk crew lives to save a damaged vessel? Lee asked, genuinely puzzled. Surely building new ships is more efficient than repairing heavily damaged ones. Jin looked at him strangely. Those crew members are volunteering to save their shipmates' lives, and every ship we keep fighting is one more vessel between the hive and our colonies. We don't have the luxury of retreat. By the battle's end, the combined human and Confederation forces had driven the hive back. The cost had been high. 3 human destroyers completely lost, and nearly every other human vessel showing significant battle damage. Yet somehow, these battered ships had achieved what many thought impossible. They'd repelled a full hive incursion in the aftermath. Commander Lee walked through the human flagship's corridors, stepping carefully around repair crews welding floor plating back into place. The ship smelled of burnt electronics and coolant, but the crew moved with purpose, not defeat. In the makeshift meeting room, the original conference room having been destroyed, Lee found Captain Kang studying battle reports. Your ships performed remarkably, Lee said, choosing his words carefully. The Confederation Military Council will want a full report on your battle damage protocols. Kang nodded, pointing to a display showing repair schedules. We'll be combat ready again in under 2 weeks. The Relentless and Orion in just 4 days. Lee couldn't hide his astonishment. You're repairing them, not replacing them. Of course we're repairing them, Kang replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. Those ships and crews have experience now. They know what hive weapons feel like, how their ships move. Why would we sideline our most valuable assets? As Commander Lee prepared to return to his vessel, he paused at the airlock, looking back at the scarred interior of the human ship. The Confederation had always valued precision, elegance, and avoiding conflict where possible. These humans embraced a different philosophy entirely, one that acknowledged the inevitability of damage and built their entire strategy around surviving it. "We'll need to rethink everything," he told his officers back on the Starbourne. The Hive retreated not because we outmaneuvered them, but because the humans simply refused to be destroyed. That night, military analysts across the Confederation began urgently studying human battle footage. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of galactic power, not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through the simple, human concept that a wounded warrior could still hold the line. Engineer Choi had spent 15 years designing the most elegant starships in the Confederation fleet. Her vessels were marvels of efficiency, every system optimized, every component serving multiple functions, all excess weight eliminated. She had won the Galactic Design Excellence Award 3 times, and now, standing in the cavernous engine, room of the human warship Indomitable, she felt like a complete amateur. "This makes no sense," she muttered, studying the massive power distribution node. "Why have 4 separate reactor cores when one larger one would be 20% more efficient?" Next to her, Human Chief Engineer Hans smiled patiently. "Because if one gets damaged, we don't lose all power, but the shielding required for 4 cores instead of 1. We don't think about it as extra shielding," Han interrupted gently. "We think about it as 4 chances to survive instead of 1. The joint human-alien engineering team had been assembled following the Hive attack. For 2 weeks now, engineers from across the Confederation had been poring over human warship designs, trying to understand the philosophy that had allowed them to survive contact with an enemy that had previously decimated all opposition. "Please explain these," said Officer Yoon, pointing at a row of large wheels mounted on a wall. "Our scans can't determine their purpose." "Manual valve controls," Han replied. "If the electronic systems fail, we can still redirect coolant, fuel, and air by turning those by hand." Yoon blinked his 3 eyes in succession, a sign of confusion in his species. "But the electronic systems are 99.8% reliable, and when that 0.2% happens in the middle of a battle," Han said, "someone can grab that wheel and turn it." Throughout the massive ship, similar scenes played out as the alien engineers encountered system after system that defied their understanding of efficient design. Backup systems for backup systems, mechanical interfaces alongside digital ones, equipment that could be repaired with simple tools rather than specialized fabricators. In the mess hall that evening, Engineer Choi sat with her colleagues, all of them looking slightly shell-shocked. "They have dedicated damage control teams," said Officer Park, an environmental systems specialist. "Crew members whose only job is to repair battle damage while the fighting is still happening. And have you seen their hull construction?" added Engineer Joe. "Layers upon layers. When the outer layer gets damaged, there are still 2 more beneath it. It's so heavy." The massive view screen on the bridge of the Confederation flagship showed an incoming fleet that left Admiral Kim speechless. After decades of exploring the galaxy, the Confederation had encountered many new species, but none quite like this. "Are you certain these readings are accurate?" Admiral Kim asked, adjusting his uniform collar nervously. Officer Bayek nodded. "Yes, Admiral. The human vessels are approaching exactly as shown." What stunned the Confederation crew wasn't the size of the human ships, though they were indeed large, but their design. Unlike the sleek, energy-efficient vessels used throughout the known galaxy, these human warships looked like floating fortresses, angular, asymmetrical, and bristling with what appeared to be physical weapon systems rather than energy projectors. "Where are their shield emitters?" asked Tactical Officer June, frantically scanning the approaching vessels. "That's just it, sir," replied Beck. "As far as we can tell, they don't have any." A murmur of disbelief swept through the bridge. No shields. It was military suicide by all known standards of space combat. When the communication channel opened, the humans appeared calm and friendly, not at all like a species whose warship design seemed to defy logic. Captain Park, the human representative, smiled warmly from the screen. "Admiral Kim, on behalf of Earth and her colonies, we extend greetings and look forward to establishing diplomatic relations." The diplomatic summit that followed revealed even more surprises. In the grand meeting hall of the Confederation Station, delegates from 12 species gathered to welcome humanity into the galactic community. The human delegation sat comfortably among beings with extra limbs, unusual skin colors, and bodies, adapted to different gravities. "Your vessels are quite unique," Admiral Kim said during the formal dinner. He tried to phrase it diplomatically, but his curiosity had been building for hours. "May I ask about your design philosophy?" Captain Park set down her drink. "You mean why we build ships that can take a beating instead of avoiding damage altogether?" The bluntness made several alien delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Well, yes," Kim admitted. "It's simple, really," Park explained. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. On our world, we didn't develop as the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species. Instead, we learned to endure, to keep going when others would stop. Our ships reflect that heritage." Engineer Officer Jin, who had been studying the human vessel schematics provided during the information exchange, leaned forward. "But your power systems are completely exposed in several sections. One precise hit could take out one of our 4 separate power cores," Park finished. "For him. The other 3 would continue functioning, and we carry replacement parts and trained repair crews who can work during battle." This concept, fighting while damaged, seemed to puzzle the Confederation representatives more than anything else. Their own doctrine had always emphasized avoiding damage at all costs. "But your ships are so heavy," said Ambassador Yeon from the methane-breathing Null Collective. "The energy requirements must be enormous compared to our designs," Captain Park smiled. "They are. We compensated by developing extremely efficient reactor technology, different path to the same destination." As the summit progressed over the next 3 days, more details emerged about human military thinking that left the Confederation strategists both fascinated and disturbed. The humans described their history of warfare, thousands of years of conflict that had shaped their approach to combat. "You design your ships to protect your most vital systems by hiding them deep within the structure," observed Admiral Kim during a tour of the human vessel Kentucky. "We design ours to avoid being hit at all." Captain Park ran her hand along a section of corridor with visible repair marks. "Both approaches have merit, but we've found that in prolonged conflicts, the ability to absorb damage and keep fighting often makes the difference between victory and defeat." When the Kentucky's chief engineer showed the Confederation visitors the damage control teams practicing emergency repairs, several alien delegates appeared genuinely shocked. The concept of continuing to fight after sustaining damage rather than retreating for repairs was completely foreign to them. On the final day of the summit, as treaties were signed and formal alliance procedures began, Admiral Kim found himself alone with Captain Park in the observation lounge, watching their ships floating side by side against the backdrop of stars. "I must admit," Kim said quietly, "when I first saw your vessels, I thought your species was technologically primitive." Park laughed. "We get that a lot. But sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the most elegant one." "Your ships tell a story about your people," Kim observed. "They say you expect to be hurt, but you're determined to survive it." Park nodded, looking out at the Kentucky's battle-scarred hull. "That's humanity in a nutshell, Admiral. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, we get damaged, but we keep going." As the human delegation prepared to depart the following morning, Admiral Kim couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just met something unlike anything encountered before. Not because humans possessed superior technology or greater intelligence. Many species had those, but because they approached problems from a completely different angle. In his private log that night, Kim wrote, "They build their ships as if expecting to face overwhelming odds. What does that say about their history? And what might it mean for their future and ours?" 6 months after first contact, the emergency alert blared through Confederation headquarters. Commander Lee startled awake in his quarters, nearly knocking over the night lamp as he fumbled for the communications panel. "Report," he said, voice still rough with sleep. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from multiple human colonies near the Orion Arm," said Officer Sun, her face pale on the screen. "The Hive has launched a full-scale attack." Lee felt his blood run cold. The Hive, a mysterious collective of insectoid beings, had been quiet for nearly 2 decades. Their return now targeting the newest members of the Confederation couldn't be coincidence. "Alert Admiral Kim. Prepare a response fleet," Lee ordered, already pulling on his uniform. "And get me everything we have on human defense capabilities." Hours later, a hastily assembled Confederation relief force jumped into the Tau Ceti system, home to one of humanity's largest off-world colonies. Commander Lee stood on the bridge of the Starbourne, bracing himself to find devastation. The Hive were ruthlessly efficient. Their previous attacks on other species had left nothing but ruins. Choi pushed her food around on her plate. But it works. They survived the Hive. The next morning, the engineering team gathered in a large briefing room. The walls displayed cross-sections of both Confederation and human vessel designs side by side. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. The Confederation ships were sleek, with integrated systems carefully arranged to create perfect power and data flow. The human vessels looked almost haphazard by comparison, with redundant systems, extra compartments, and thick structural reinforcement everywhere. Admiral Kim entered, followed by Human Fleet Commander Park. The room quieted immediately. "Your analysis, please, Engineer Choi," Admiral Kim requested. Choi stood, suddenly aware that her conclusions might sound like criticism of decades of Confederation ship design. "The human approach to warship engineering is fundamentally different from ours," she began carefully. "Where we design to prevent damage through agility and shields, they design to survive damage through redundancy and physical protection." She highlighted several areas on the schematic. They have multiple smaller reactors instead of one optimized core. Manual backups for digital systems. Their hull material is 30% heavier than ours, but can absorb significantly more energy. Before failing, their power conduits have physical circuit breakers that prevent cascade failures. Commander Park nodded along, showing no offense at the clinical dissection of human design philosophy. "Most surprising," Choi continued, "is their approach to crew safety. Rather than minimizing crew exposure to danger through automation, they have specialized teams trained to enter damaged areas during combat to make emergency repairs." Admiral Kim frowned. "Isn't that incredibly dangerous for the crew members?" "Yes," Commander Park answered simply. "But less dangerous than losing." The ship with all hands, Engineer Joe raised a hand. "We've calculated that human vessels require 15% more resources to construct than Confederation vessels of similar capability, and their power requirements are 20% higher due to the added mass." "That's correct, Commander," Park acknowledged. "Our ships are less efficient in peacetime and ideal conditions. They're built for the moments when conditions are neither peaceful nor ideal." A silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. For generations, the Confederation had optimized their vessels to be perfect in normal operations, while the humans had optimized theirs to keep functioning when everything went wrong. "There's something else," Engineer Choi said, bringing up new schematics. "Their damage control protocols. When a section is damaged beyond immediate repair, they don't just seal it off. They reconfigure nearby systems to route around it. Their ships can actually change their internal operation during battle." She displayed footage from the recent Hive engagement, showing a human destroyer continuing to maneuver and fire, despite losing one of its main propulsion units. This ship should have been limited to 30% maneuverability with this damage, but they redistributed power to secondary thrusters and achieved 70% capacity. Admiral Kim turned to Commander Park. "Why do you build ships this way? The complexity must be enormous." Park's expression turned solemn. "Because in our history, Admiral, we learned that survival often doesn't go to the strongest or the most advanced. It goes to whoever can take the hit and keep standing." Later that day, as the engineering team prepared recommendations for the Confederation Council, Engineer Choi found herself alone in the observation deck with Human Chief Engineer Han. Below, them through the transparent floor, the massive engines of the Indomitable hummed steadily. "Your designs challenge everything I was taught," Choi admitted. "We're trained to create perfect systems." Han looked thoughtful. "Perfection is a luxury of peace. We design for the reality of conflict." "But why? Has your species faced so many existential threats?" "Not from outside," Han said quietly. "For Most of our history, our greatest threats were ourselves. We learned the hard way that survival sometimes means absorbing damage that should, by all rights, destroy you. As she left the human vessel that evening, Engineer Choi carried with her not just technical schematics, but a new understanding of the species that had created them. Their ships weren't just war machines, they were physical manifestations of humanity's evolutionary story. A story of a species that had learned to endure, to adapt, and to keep functioning despite damage that should have been fatal. The Confederation had built beautiful ships designed never to be hit. The humans had built resilient ships designed never to die. The warning came at dawn ship time. The Hive had returned, not with the scattered raiding parties of before, but with a massive fleet aimed directly at the Proxima Centauri system, humanity's oldest and most populous colony outside the solar system. On the bridge of the Confederation, flagship Celestial Guardian, Admiral Kim reviewed the sensor data with growing dread. They've committed everything, at least 300 vessels. We've got 86 Confederation ships ready, Officer June reported. The humans have promised 42. Admiral Kim frowned. Not enough. Not nearly enough. When the combined defense fleet gathered at the jump point near Proxima, the mood was tense. The Confederation captains maintained strict formation, their sleek vessels arranged in the classic defensive shell pattern that had been standard doctrine for centuries. The human warships looked even more imposing than before. Their hulls showed recent repairs, some sections clearly newer than others, battle scars from the previous encounter with the Hive. They arranged themselves in a formation that Confederation tactical officers described as chaotic and unnecessarily exposed. Admiral Kang, Kim said over the command channel, I recommend your vessels take position behind our forward screen. Our shield harmonics have been calibrated specifically to counter Hive energy weapons. On the view screen, human Admiral Kang shook her head. With respect, Admiral, we'll maintain our current position. Your ships are faster and more maneuverable. Our vessels are better suited to direct engagement. Before Kim could argue further, the sensors lit up. The Hive fleet had arrived. The initial exchange went exactly as the Confederation tactical simulations had predicted. Their advanced shields deflected the first wave of Hive attacks, while precision counterstrikes disabled the lead enemy vessels. For 15 minutes, it seemed the defensive strategy would hold. Then the Hive adapted. Their second wave concentrated fire on specific points in the Confederation shield network, overwhelming the carefully balanced energy distribution. 3 Confederation cruisers lost shields simultaneously. Evasive pattern Delta, Kim ordered. Maintain the defensive shell. But as the Confederation vessels shifted to protect their suddenly vulnerable comrades, the human fleet did something completely unexpected. Rather than falling back with the rest of the Allied forces, they accelerated. Toward the enemy. What are they doing? Officer June asked in disbelief. On the tactical display, the human warships formed into what looked like a physical wall between the advancing Hive and the damaged Confederation vessels. Admiral Kang, withdraw immediately, Kim shouted over the command channel. You're placing your vessels directly in their line of fire. That's exactly the point, Admiral, Kang replied calmly. Our ships can take those hits, yours currently cannot. What followed defied everything the Confederation knew about space combat. The human vessels deliberately positioned their heaviest armor toward the enemy, absorbing devastating hits that would have destroyed the more vulnerable Confederation ships. When one section of a human ship became too damaged, they rotated to present fresh armor, like ancient warriors with shields. Their power levels are dropping, Officer Yun reported, watching the readings from the human flagship, the UES Defiant. They can't possibly maintain this, yet somehow they did. As the Confederation ships regrouped and repaired their shield systems, the human vessels held the line, their point defense weapons creating a nearly solid wall of counterfire. 2 hours. Into the battle, the Hive launched a concentrated assault on the human right flank. 3 human destroyers took critical hits in rapid succession. One exploded outright. The second spun away, leaking atmosphere and debris. The third, the UES Intrepid, appeared to lose all power, drifting lifelessly. The Intrepid is gone, Officer June reported grimly. The battle continued to rage around the apparently dead vessel. The Hive, following their usual tactic, ignored disabled targets to focus on active threats. 4 Hive cruisers moved past the darkened hull of the Intrepid, pressing their advantage against the weakened human flank. Then, something miraculous happened. The dead Intrepid suddenly flared to life, all weapon systems firing simultaneously. At point-blank range into the exposed rear sections of the Hive vessels, 2 enemy cruisers exploded immediately. A third spun out of control, its propulsion system shattered. "They play dead," Officer Sun whispered in awe. "They deliberately shut down all systems to appear destroyed. They trap," Admiral Kim realized. "They use their own damaged ship as bait." This unexpected tactic threw the Hive fleet into disarray. Suddenly, they couldn't determine which human vessels were truly disabled and which might spring back to life at any moment. Their formation began to fracture as ships hesitated to pass near dead human vessels. Seizing the opportunity, Admiral Kim reorganized the Confederation forces. "All vessels offensive pattern Sigma, target the enemy's command ships." The tide of battle turned. The Confederation's precision strikes, combined with the humans' unrelenting physical presence, gradually pushed the Hive back. After 7 hours of intensive combat, the enemy fleet finally broke, jumping away to safety with less than half their original numbers. The aftermath was sobering. 6 Confederation vessels destroyed, 14 with significant damage. The human losses were even more severe. 11 ships destroyed outright, and every remaining vessel showing battle damage. The UES Defiant, Admiral Kang's flagship, had lost a third of its hull structure and was operating on backup power systems. Admiral Kim's shuttle approached the battered Defiant for the post-battle conference. Looking through the viewport at the human flagship's shattered form, he could hardly believe it was still functioning. Entire sections were open to space, temporarily sealed with emergency force fields. Repair crews in spacesuits crawled over the hull like tiny insects, cutting away damaged plating and welding new sections in place. Inside, the ship was a hive of activity. Damage control teams rushed through corridors. Medical staff treated wounded crew members. Engineers rerouted power through jury-rigged systems. Admiral Kang met him in what remained of the command center. One wall was completely missing, replaced by a temporary barrier. She had a fresh bandage over her left eye. "Your flagship," Kim began, not quite knowing what to say. "Will you be transferring to another vessel?" Kang looked surprised by the question. "Transfer? No. The Defiant will be fully operational again in 2 weeks." Kim couldn't hide his shock. "Admiral, with respect, your ship has suffered catastrophic damage. Surely it would be more efficient to commission a new vessel." "This ship and crew just survived the worst the Hive could throw at them," Kang replied, running her hand along a damaged console with something like affection. "The knowledge gained from that experience is worth more than any new hull." As they reviewed the battle together, Kim began to understand what had happened. The human ships hadn't just protected the Confederation vessels. They had drawn the Hive into a type of combat they weren't prepared for. The enemy had expended enormous energy trying to destroy ships that refused to die, while those same damaged vessels continued to fight back. "You're playing dead tactic," Kim said. "That was planned?" "Standard procedure," Kang nodded. "When critical systems are failing, we power down everything non-essential. The enemy thinks we're neutralized, moves on, and then we bring systems back online when we can do the most damage." Before leaving, Admiral Kim toured the Defiant's engineering section, where repair crews worked tirelessly. Despite the devastating damage, there was no sense of defeat. If anything, the crew seemed energized, proud of their vessel's wounds. "We'll keep her battle scars visible on the port hull," Chief Engineer Han told him with unmistakable pride. "Tradition. They tell a story." As Kim's shuttle departed, he looked back at the human fleet, battered, broken, but unbowed. The Confederation had always built beautiful ships designed to avoid damage at all costs. The humans had built resilient ships designed to endure damage and keep fighting, and today, that philosophy had saved them all, 1 year after the battle of Proxima. Admiral Kim stood at the observation window of Starbase 12, watching shipyard workers swarm over the massive frame of a vessel unlike any the Confederation had built before. The CSS Resilience gleamed under the worklights, its hull a curious blend of smooth Confederation aesthetics and angular human defensive geometry. "Quite a sight, isn't she?" said a voice behind him. Kim turned to find human engineer Song approaching, carrying a tablet filled with technical readouts. In the year since the Hive attack, Song had become the lead consultant on the Confederation's new shipbuilding program. "I never thought I'd see such a design flying under our flag," Kim admitted. "The Council was resistant to change," Song smiled. "Until you showed them the battle simulations. The simulations had been the turning point. Using data from Proxima, Confederation analysts had conclusively proven that their traditional vessel design would have resulted in total fleet loss against a Hive force of that size. Only the human ship's ability to absorb punishment had given the Allied forces enough time to regroup and counterattack. "The outer hull section is finally complete," Song said, bringing up a schematic on her tablet. "Triple-layered composite armor with reactive elements, just like our designs, but incorporating your energy dispersal technology." Kim nodded approvingly. "And the internal systems? Distributed power cores, manual backups, and dedicated damage control corridors." Song highlighted each feature on the display. "Though I must say your engineers came up with some improvements even we hadn't considered." That had been the true revelation of the past year, not just the Confederation learning from human resilience, but humans adopting Confederation precision where it made sense. The resulting designs represented a true melding of philosophies. Later that day, Kim attended the officer assignment ceremony for the new hybrid fleet. The large hall was filled with both Confederation and human personnel, now wearing the same uniform, but with subtle differences indicating their world of origin. Commander Lee, now promoted to captain, approached Kim after the ceremony. "My new damage control officer reported today. Human served on the Intrepid at Proxima." "The ship that played dead," Kim recalled. "Exactly. She's already training my crew in mid-battle repair techniques." Lee looked both impressed and slightly overwhelmed. "Some of my officers are struggling with the concept of running toward damaged sections rather than away from them." "It's a significant cultural shift," Kim acknowledged. "The largest change wasn't the technology but the mindset. Confederation crews had always been trained to preserve their vessels at all costs, retreat when damaged, prioritize system integrity over mission objectives. The human approach of keep fighting until you can't had initially seemed reckless, even suicidal. Now it was becoming standard doctrine." 3 days later, Admiral Kim boarded the CSS Resilience for her first space trials. The bridge was a fascinating blend of design philosophies, the clean holographic interfaces of Confederation vessels alongside the physical backup controls and reinforced stations of human warships. "All systems online, Admiral," reported Officer June, now serving as the Resilience's first officer. "Engineering reports all 4 power cores functioning at optimal levels." "Very good. Take us out 1/4 thrust." As the massive hybrid vessel eased away from the space dock, Kim felt a surge of pride. The Resilience represented more than just a new class of ship. It symbolized the evolution of an entire civilization's approach to adversity. In the officers' mess that evening, Kim shared a meal with the ship's senior staff, an even mix of human and Confederation personnel. The conversations around him reflected the ongoing cultural integration. Confederation officers discussing damage control scenarios with human counterparts, humans learning the finer points of Confederation sensor technology. "I've been meaning to ask," said Human Lieutenant Jun, the damage control chief, "why did your people never develop our approach to ship design? You've been in space far longer than we have." Kim considered the question carefully. "I believe it comes down to different evolutionary paths. Most Confederation species evolved in environments where avoidance was the optimal survival strategy. When threatened, our ancestors hid or fled. While humans evolved as persistence predators," Jun nodded, "we chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." "Precisely. We built ships that could avoid damage because that aligned with our instincts. You built ships that could endure Damage because that aligned with yours. 2 weeks later, with the Resilience's trials successfully completed, the new hybrid fleet assembled for its first deployment. From his position on the bridge, Admiral Kim watched as 20 vessels of the new design formed up around his flagship. They looked powerful in a way that the old Confederation ships never had, not delicate and precise, but solid and unyielding. His communication officer announced, "Admiral, incoming message from Fleet Command." The view screen activated to show the Confederation High Council chamber. After formal greetings, the High Chancellor spoke. "Admiral Kim, you are hereby ordered to take the first Resilient fleet to the Hive border and secure our territory. Intelligence suggests they are regrouping for another offensive." "We'll be ready, Chancellor," Kim replied with quiet confidence. When the communication ended, he turned to his mixed bridge crew. "Set course for the border. Maximum sustainable speed." As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, Kim found himself reflecting on how much had changed in just 1 year. Before meeting the humans, the Confederation had approached conflict, with the assumption that superior technology and precision would always prevail. The humans had shown them that sometimes survival demanded not avoiding the hit, but absorbing it and striking back. In his private quarters that night, Kim studied the latest reports from shipyards across the Confederation. Every major species was now incorporating human design elements into their vessels. Damage control was becoming a prestigious assignment rather than an afterthought. Cadets were being trained in manual backup procedures alongside advanced technical skills. A cultural shift was spreading through the entire Confederation. The understanding that true resilience came not from perfection, but from the ability to continue functioning despite imperfection. When the fleet reached the border 3-4 days later, they found a Hive scouting force already probing Confederation territory. In the brief skirmish that followed, 2 Confederation vessels took moderate damage, but continued fighting effectively thanks to their new design and training. The Hive ships quickly retreated, clearly unprepared for this new type of opponent. Standing on the Resilience's bridge afterward, watching repair teams efficiently addressing the minor damage they'd sustained, Admiral Kim felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire military career: the absolute certainty that they could withstand whatever came next. Not because they could avoid every attack, but because they had finally learned what humans had known all along, that the strongest vessel wasn't the one that never got hit, but the one that could take the hit and keep fighting. As the fleet established its patrol pattern along the border, the CSS Resilience led the formation, its hull bearing the small scars of its first encounter proudly. Just as human engineer, Song had insisted, they hadn't buffed out the marks. They told a story that the entire galaxy needed to hear.